It is my experience that successful initiatives involving an outside consultancy is usually led by someone in the firm who knows how to best leverage those consultants. In this interview with Eric Mosca, we talked about it from the consultancy's point of view. He suggests 3 best practices that will dramatically increase project chances of success. We covered all of that and the birth of his 3rd child, as well as shaving his hipster's beard. Welcome to Law Firm Weekly. It's great to have you here. Eric Mosca is Director of Operations and owner at InOutsource. He also leads complex client engagements and consults law firms on business intake, conflicts of interest, and information governance. Eric, welcome to the studio.
Thank you, Shai. Thanks for having me.
You just had your 3rd child, and I'm kind of wondering if all of your experience as Director of Operations and a consultant is helping you any.
No, you think you're prepared. You're never prepared to be thrown back into having a little newborn again at home.
And it's especially interesting during this, unfortunately, this pandemic. Unfortunately, that there's a pandemic, obviously, I'm sure it's like an amazing experience. The setup for this interview is actually not so much about InOutsource specifically, even though I want you to kind of give us the elevator pitch because I think people are interested in hearing a little bit about the firm. But the setup is how to make sure that our clients, that law firms, take full advantage of what I call excellent consultants. But before we go there, maybe you can give us the 15 seconds, maybe 17 seconds elevator pitch on InOutsource.
Sure, you got it. Well, interestingly, InOutsource was founded as a pure consultancy, meaning that we offered consultative services and nothing else to compete with that for probably the first 10 years of our existence. But we are today and consistently over the years help law firms with issues related to conflicts of interest, new business intake, information governance. And that sometimes is formulating policies and procedures, crafting new mechanisms for the firm to be successful in those ventures, but also implementing technology in support of those operations as well.
Now, obviously, a great experienced consultancy can make or break a complex process automation projects and other projects, obviously. But equally as important are how clients take advantage of such a consultancy. I mean, you can be an amazing organization that has been working with dozens and dozens of clients on specific projects with lots of experience. But we also know that if you don't have a good partner, it makes things more difficult. When you start an engagement, what would you think is the most important thing to get going from the client side?
Probably the first thing that we really focus on, and it's as much requiring the law firm to play ball here, is a really concise, very thorough scoping exercise. We cannot be successful as an organization if we are not agreed on what is the scope of our undertaking. We love when clients are just so ready to hire us based on our reputation or working with us previously, but we have to slow things down and talk about what are we hoping to achieve here. And we're even thinking about ways that on an ongoing basis, we can tie this better into the way that we're compensated. So I love the idea of success-based criteria that says we're compensated based on how well we solve your problem.
So when we're talking about the cost of an engagement, obviously clients are, for reasonable reasons, are trying to contain costs, but sometimes they may be cutting in the wrong places. What are your concerns, especially when you're looking at more complex engagements, that upfront not enough hours will be put forward towards some of those activities? What kind of activities, and in general terms, where do you see clients sometimes cutting corners that could bite them later on?
A common area is we want to talk to a wide cross-section of folks. The input that I have in terms of the firm's strategic goals, if I talk with the managing partner, the general counsel, lawyers from various practice areas, will be much more well-informed than if I've only heard this filtered through someone else. It'll also mean often that investing that time up front means that we don't have to revisit this far down the road. So I imagine that you and I have both been on the fringes of those types of projects where you march along for 6 months with one idea in mind, and someone comes in to disrupt that plan later on in the process. Imagine if we had their input up front and didn't have to redo all of that work. It's almost always going to be worth it to spend that time up front.
In our pre-interview conversation, you were quite passionate about another aspect, and that's the limits of automation.
Well, I don't think that there's necessarily a tendency to overlook the humans intentionally, but especially when we're dealing with a software implementation project, there's the hope and the desire that software will solve all of these problems. And we often have to remind law firms to think about those, those human resources, the investments that have been made over time. If we think about a culture of compliance, whether it's with information governance, managing the content that your clients trust you to manage or create on their behalf, if I don't file it in the right Matter workspace, how can we automate the process of disposing of those records, right? If we're talking about a new business intake process and I don't supply the correct information to you, the automation all falls to pieces. So what we need are the humans that are involved in this process to use their expertise, their institutional knowledge to help direct. What we're primarily, I think, hoping for is that technology will be a way to surface information, to make available to those resources the right details that help to empower their decision making.
Any other key issues that you like to raise that you think, if the client thinks about, together with the consultancy, could make the engagement smoother and raise the possibility of great success?
Well, I know this is probably a familiar trope, right? People don't get excited too much these days about project management, but it's something that is key to every engagement that we take on. We have to be clear in this partnership about how we'll talk to each other, about how we'll share documentation, and what are those outcomes. To me, that's project management 101, but we see many organizations that don't adhere to those basic principles.
When it comes to controlling costs, obviously a very important part of any engagement and ties to a certain extent, of course, to good project management. What is it that you recommend the clients do to make sure that costs don't spiral out of control?
I think it really helps when a client knows themselves, right? We have had very successful engagements where the definition of success meant having one-on-one discussions with senior firm leadership to the tune of 3 times a week for months on end. These were unexpected costs at the beginning of that particular project, but worked out very successfully. And it was something that was necessary for that firm to build their own picture of what we were kind of crafting here and to sell it to the partnership. We have other firms that are very adept at decision making, come into an engagement knowing what they're hoping to achieve out of this, and there are no surprises. So we ask a firm when we're starting to really, have an understanding of whether we are crafting something that is completely unknown here, and you can imagine that's difficult to scope for, versus the firm that says, we know what we want, we don't have to have every detail of this ironed out, but we know what we're trying to achieve, and here are our goals. Those projects come in under budget, in terms of timeline, and we can be very successful there. Not every project can look like that, but it's nice when they do.
Well, I think we're going to wrap up now, but before we go, I want to tell you that I resent the fact that I didn't get the scoop of the before and the after of you shaving your beard. And those who know you will immediately recognize that there's a dramatic difference. I really wanted to do a before and after, but I guess we'll do it some other time. Eric, thank you so much for taking the time for sitting here with us and talking a little bit about this important topic.
Thanks for having me, Shai. And this may end up being your greatest scoop, the only video of me in the last 20 years without a beard.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Shai.